Long ago, there lived a young man named Suho in the grasslands of Mongolia. Suho was a skilled singer and lived with his mother, raising sheep. One day, Suho went out to the grasslands to let the sheep graze, but he did not return home even after nightfall. As his mother worried, Suho returned home carrying a newborn white foal. His mother asked Suho, "Where did you find that beautiful foal?" Suho answered happily, "I found this foal on my way back. There was no owner or mother horse nearby. I thought that if I left it there, the wolf might eat it during the night, so I brought it home. Let's raise this foal together." Suho cherished the white foal and raised it with great care and love. The foal grew quickly and became a magnificent horse as white as snow. Suho and the white horse were as close as brothers and were always together. One day, news reached the village where Suho lived. The king was gathering young men from all over the kingdom to hold a horse racing competition. The winner would be granted the right to marry the princess. The villagers told Suho, "Suho, you should go. You're sure to win." On the day of the horse race, young men from all over the region gathered with their prized horses. However, no horse could match Suho's white horse, and Suho won the race. The king ordered his servants, "Bring that young man and the white horse here." Suho was overjoyed. However, when the king learned that Suho was a poor shepherd, his attitude changed. The king decided to abandon his plan to marry him to his princess. The king coldly ordered, "Leave that white horse behind. In exchange, I will give you 3 pieces of gold." Suho was shocked. "This white horse is like family to me. To try to buy it with money is too cruel." Suho refused the king's order. The king became enraged and shouted, "You insolent creature who disobeys the king's orders!" Servants beat him with whips. The servants whipped Suho until he was covered in wounds. Then they threw him out of the castle. The king took the white horse and returned his room. With the help of his friends, Suho finally made it back home. Suho was beaten with a whip and his body was covered in wounds, leaving him bedridden for days. However, thanks to his mother's diligent care, Suho gradually regained his strength. One evening, there was a knock on the door. Suho called out, "Who is it?" But there was no answer. Curious, Suho went outside and was startled. There, standing by the gate, was the white horse. Suho ran to the horse and embraced it tightly. "You've come back," he said. However, the white horse's body was pierced with several sharp arrows. Suho was filled with shock and sorrow and frantically pulled out the arrows. He then tended to the horse with his mother. Unfortunately, the white horse died the next day. Later, Suho learned why the white horse had returned. The king was so delighted to have obtained the white horse that he gathered a large crowd and held a feast. When the king tried to mount the white horse in front of the people, the horse threw him off. Enraged, the king ordered his servants, "Capture this wild horse. If you cannot catch it, kill it." The servants fired arrows at the fleeing white horse like rain. Despite the arrows piercing its body, the white horse continued to run. With all its strength, it raced towards Suho's home. The white horse wanted to die by Suho's side, who had raised it with such care. After the white horse died, Suho spent days and nights filled with sorrow and regret, unable to sleep. One day, Suho took out his bow and arrows and began to clean them. Suho decided to kill the king with his bow and avenge the white horse. "White horse, wait for me. Tomorrow morning, I will kill that king and avenge you." That night, the white horse appeared in Suho's dream and said, "Suho, thank you so much for deciding to avenge me. I am very happy. But I am already dead. Even if you kill the king, I cannot come back to life. Worse yet, you will be killed as well. So, please abandon your plan to avenge me. In exchange, I have a request. Please use my body to make a lute. I will become the lute and remain by your side forever." The next day, Suho used the white horse's bones and tail hair to make a lute. He carved the shape of a white horse's head at the end of the zither's neck. From then on, Suho tended sheep on the grassland while always playing the zither. The sound of the zither was beautiful and touching. The sound of Suho's zither brought great comfort to the shepherds around him. When the sound of Suho's zither echoed across the grassland, everyone forgot the fatigue of the day and listened quietly to the music. Melos was extremely angry. He firmly resolved, "I must defeat that cunning and cruel king." Melos knew nothing about politics. He was a shepherd living in a small village. He spent his days peacefully playing the flute and tending to his sheep. However, he was highly sensitive to injustice. That morning, he set out from the village. He crossed fields and mountains, traveling 40 kilometers to the town of Syracuse. Melos had no parents, and he had no wife. He lived with his shy 16-year-old sister. His sister was engaged to a serious young shepherd in the village, and their wedding was soon to be held. Melos had come to the town to buy wedding clothes and a feast for his sister. First, he gathered the necessary items. Then he began to stroll leisurely along the main street of the city. Melos had a close friend from childhood. His name was Seleniantus. Seleniantus was now working as a stonemason in the town of Syracuse. Melos intended to visit his friend. Having not seen him in a long time, Melos was looking forward to meeting him. As he walked, Melos noticed that the town seemed different from usual. It was very quiet. It was already evening, so it was natural for the town to be dark, but there was something more than just the darkness of night. An eerie stillness pervaded the air. Even Melos, who was usually cheerful, began to feel uneasy. He stopped a young man he encountered on the street and asked, "Has something unusual happened? When I came here 2 years ago, even at night, people were singing, and the town was lively." The young man shook his head and did not answer. A little further down the road, Melos encountered an old man. This time, he asked the same question in a stronger tone. However, the old man also did not answer. Melos shook the old man's body with both hands and asked the question repeatedly. Finally, the old man answered in a low voice, glancing around him. "The king is killing people." Melos asked in surprise, "Why is he killing them?" The old man replied, "The king says that people have evil hearts. But in truth, no one has such a heart." "Have you killed many people?" "Yes. First, he killed his sister's husband. Then he killed his own son. After that, he killed his sister and her children, and finally the queen. In the end, he also killed the wise minister, Alecus." "That's terrible. Has the king gone mad?" "No, he hasn't gone mad. The king has simply lost the ability to trust anyone. Lately, he even doubts the hearts of his own servants. He orders those who live in luxury to hand over a hostage. Those who disobey are crucified and killed. Today, 6 people were killed." Hearing this, Melos grew furious. What a terrible king! Such a man must not be allowed to live. Melos was an honest and simple man. Carrying the goods he had purchased, he slowly made his way toward the king's castle. Melos was immediately arrested by the patrol guards. When his belongings were searched, a dagger was found in his clothes, causing a commotion. Melos was brought before the king. King Dionysus spoke quietly but with authority. "What did you intend to do with this dagger? Answer me." The king's face was pale, and deep wrinkles were etched into his forehead. Melos answered boldly, "I intended to save this town from a tyrant like you." The king laughed derisively. "You? What a foolish man! You do not understand my loneliness. Melos retorted angrily. Doubting people's hearts is the most shameful and evil thing you can do. You don't even trust the loyalty of your own people. The king spoke quietly. It was none other than humans who taught me that doubting is the right attitude. You can't trust people's hearts. Humans are inherently selfish. You must not trust them. The king sighed. Even I, deep down, desire peace. Melos retorted. Peace? Peace to protect your position? Where is peace in killing innocent people? The king raised his face angrily. Shut up, you lowly creature. You may speak noble words, but your heart is transparent. You will surely cry and beg for your life when the time comes for your execution. Melos retorted. MPH, the king thinks he's clever. But I am prepared to die. I will never beg for my life. However, Melos paused, looking down at his feet, hesitating for a moment. However, if you would show me mercy, please grant me 3 days reprieve before my execution. I want to give my only sister a proper wedding. I will return within 3 days. The king snorted derisively. Ridiculous. Do you think a bird that's been let out of its cage will come back? I will. I will keep my promise. My sister is waiting for me to return. If you don't trust me, there's a stonemason named Seleniantus in this town. He's my dear friend. I'll leave him here as a hostage. If I don't return by sunset on the 3rd day, kill my friend. The king smirked to himself. How dare he talk back? I'll never come back. I'll pretend to believe him and let him go, then execute the substitute on the 3rd day. That would be amusing. I'll show everyone that humans can't be trusted. The king said, I will grant your wish. Bring the substitute here. If you do not return by sunset on the 3rd day, I will kill that man without mercy. Melos gritted his teeth in frustration and could say nothing. Serenantius was summoned to the royal castle in the dead of night. Before the tyrant Dionysus, Melos and Serenantius reunited after 2 years apart. Melos told Serenantius everything that had happened. Serenantius nodded silently and embraced Melos tightly. That was enough for the two of them. Serenantius was bound with ropes. Melos immediately set off. That night was early summer, and the sky was filled with stars. Melos did not sleep a wink, rushing nonstop for 40 kilometers through the night. The next morning, when the sun was high in the sky, he finally arrived at the village. The villagers were already out in the fields working. Melos's 16-year-old sister was taking care of the sheep in her brother's place that day. She was startled to see her brother coming toward her, looking exhausted. She asked him many questions. Melos forced a smile and answered, Nothing. I just have some errands left to run in town. I must go back soon. But tomorrow, we will hold your wedding. It's better to do it sooner rather than later, isn't it? His sister blushed shyly. Melos continued, Are you happy? I've even bought you a beautiful dress. Now go tell everyone in the village that tomorrow is your wedding day. Melos staggered back home and decorated the altar to the gods. After finishing the preparations for the wedding feast, he collapsed onto the floor and fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, it was night. Melos got up and immediately went to his sister's Fiasna's house. He said, There's a problem. Please reschedule the wedding to tomorrow. The young man who was supposed to be the groom was surprised and said, That's a problem. We haven't prepared anything yet. Please wait until the grape season. Melos said firmly, We can't wait. Please, let it be tomorrow. The young man stubbornly refused and would not agree. Melos continued to persuade him until dawn, finally calming him down and gaining his consent. The wedding took place at noon the next day. As the bride and groom exchanged vows before the gods, dark clouds spread across the sky, and rain began to fall lightly. Soon, it turned into a violent downpour as if the sky had split open. The villagers felt the rain was an ominous sign, but they shook off their fears, endured the heat in their cramped homes, and sang cheerfully, clapping their hands. Melos spent some time with a joyful expression, almost forgetting his promise to the king. The feast grew even more lively as night fell. The people no longer cared about the heavy rain outside. Melos thought, "I want to stay here forever." He wished he could live with these kind people for the rest of his life. However, Meris's body was not his own. Knowing this, Meros whipped himself and finally made up his mind to leave. "There is still plenty of time before sunset tomorrow. I will sleep a little and then leave immediately." That was what Meros thought. By then, the rain might have stopped. He wanted to stay in this house a little longer. Even a man like Melos had feelings of regret at parting. Melos approached his sister, who was looking happy at her wedding, and said, "Congratulations. I'm tired, so I'm going to rest for a while. When I wake up, I'll leave for the town. I have important business to attend to. Even without me, you have a kind husband, so you won't be lonely. As your brother, I hate nothing more than to distrust people and tell lies. You know that well. There should never be secrets between husband and wife. Your brother is probably a great man, so I hope you will live your life proud of that." His sister nodded quietly, as if in a dream. Melos then approached the groom, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "We are unprepared. All I have in my house is my sister and the sheep. I will give you everything. And one more thing, be proud of becoming my brother." The groom smiled shyly, rubbing his hands together. Melos laughed, bowed to the villagers, and left the banquet. He then entered the sheepfold, lay down there, and fell into a deep sleep. Melos woke up at dawn the next day. He jumped out of bed and said hurriedly, "Oh no, did I oversleep? No, it's okay. If I leave right now, I'll make it in time for the appointment." Melos was determined to reach the king's castle before sunset and show the king the honesty of humans. And he intended to climb the execution platform on his own 2 feet. Melos slowly got ready. The rain outside was gradually weakening. After finishing his preparations, Melos swung his arms widely and ran through the rain with the speed of an arrow. Melos thought to himself, "I will be killed tonight. I am running to save my friend. I am running to break the king's treacherous heart. I must run, and I will die. But I have upheld my honor since I was young. Farewell, my homeland." The young Melos was in agony. He nearly stopped many times. Each time, he shouted, "Come on!" to encourage himself and continued running. Melos left the village, crossed the meadow, and passed through the forest. By the time he reached the neighboring village, the rain had stopped, and the sun was high in the sky. The heat grew more intense. Melos wiped the sweat from his forehead and thought, "Now that I've come this far, I can rest easy. I have no more attachments to my hometown. My sister will surely become happy wife. I have nothing left to worry about. If I head straight for the castle, that will be enough. There's no need to hurry so much." Melos regained his former easygoing nature and began walking while humming to himself. He walked leisurely for 10 kilometers, reaching the halfway point of his journey, when suddenly, disaster struck. Melos stopped in his tracks at the sight before him. The river ahead had overflowed due to yesterday's heavy rain. Water flowing down from the mountains had turned into a violent torrent, sweeping away the bridge. The wooden pillars had been carried away, and the bridge was completely destroyed. Melos stood there frozen. He looked around and shouted for help, but there was no sign of a boat or anyone else. The river's current grew increasingly fierce, resembling the sea. Melos knelt down on the riverbank and wept. Then, raising both hands to the sky, he prayed to God. Please, calm this raging river. Time is passing. The sun is already directly overhead. If I don't reach the royal castle before the sun sets, my dear friend will die because of me. But the muddy torrent seemed to mock Melos' cries, growing even more violent. Huge waves crashed in one after another, swirling and churning, creating foam. Melos had made up his mind. I have no choice but to swim. Melos shouted and jumped into the muddy torrent. Like 100 giant snakes, the turbulent current twisted and turned, and Melos fought for his life. Gathering all his strength, Melos swam. Despite being swept up by the waves and carried away, he swam forward with all his might. Then, as if the god had taken pity on him, Melos finally managed to cling to a tree on the opposite shore. I'm saved. Melos shook his body violently like a horse and immediately began to run. There was no time to waste. The sun was already beginning to set in the west. Panting heavily, Melos climbed the mountain path. Just as he reached the top and let out a sigh of relief, bandits appeared before him. Stop! One of the bandits shouted. Melos shouted back. What are you doing? I must reach the castle before sunset. Let me through. However, the bandits said, we can't let you pass. Leave everything you have behind. Melos angrily retorted, I have nothing but my life, and even that I intend to give to the king. We want your life. Melos shouted, so you've come to attack me on the king's orders? The bandits fell silent and raised their clubs simultaneously. Melos crouched low, leaped at one of them, and seized his club. Then he shouted, I'm sorry, but this is for justice. Melos swung the club with all his strength, knocking down 3 bandits. Taking advantage of the others' momentary hesitation, Melos ran away. Melos sprinted down the pass. But he was finally getting tired. Moreover, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Melos felt dizzy several times and finally stopped, collapsing to his knees. Melos looked up at the sky and thought, tears of frustration streaming down his face. Ah, I swam through the raging river, fought the bandits, and made it this far. I really tried my best. Yet here I am, collapsing like Thisho, pathetic. My friend is waiting for me, believing in me, and now he might die because of me. Melos scolded himself repeatedly, but his body would not move. He collapsed onto the grass by the side of the road. When the body grows weary, the mind grows weak. I no longer care. I never intended to break my promise. I did my very best. I am not a traitor. I want to show someone my heart. This heart beats with the blood of love and honesty. But Melos muttered, it's over. I've lost to fate. Selenian twos, forgive me. You always believed in me. We were truly good friends. I believed in you too. You're probably still waiting for me, believing in me. Thank you. Melos closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Should I try to survive? Should I return to the village and live with the sheep and my sister? Justice and faith are meaningless now. Killing others to survive, is that what it means to be human? I have lost to the king. Let me die. Just as he thought that. When Melos collapsed on the side of the road and closed his eyes, he heard the sound of flowing water. It was a small, trickling sound. Melos gently raised his head and listened closely. The sound of water could be heard right at his feet. Melos staggered to his feet. Looking down, he saw clear water gushing out from a crack in the rock. The water flowed gently, as if whispering. Melos knelt beside the spring, cupped his hands, and drank the water. As the cold water passed through his throat, he let out a long sigh. It feels like I've woken from a dream. Melos thought. I can still walk. Let's go. I can still do this. Thanks to the cold water, his physical exhaustion gradually subsided, and hope returned to his heart. It was the hope that would make him risk his life to protect his honor. The sun was already setting in the western sky, casting a red glow on the leaves of the trees. The leaves and branches glowed red in the evening sunlight. There's still time. The sun hasn't set yet. Someone is waiting for me. My fiend believes in me quietly, without any doubt. I am believed in. My life is not important. I must live up to that trust. That is all that matters now. Melos told himself. Run, Melos. I am trusted. The despair I felt earlier was just a bad dream. I was tired, so I had such a dream. There is no shame in that. Melos, you are a true hero. Look, you can stand up and run again. Thank you. I can die as a man of justice. Melos began to run. Pushing and shoving the people on the road, Melos ran like a black wind. In the wide field, a banquet was in progress. The people were startled. Dogs barked and chased after him, but Melos kicked them away. He leaped over a stream and ran faster than the sun, which was slowly sinking. When he passed a group of travelers, Melos heard someone say, "By now, that man must be crucified." Melos cried out in his heart, "That man's renations! I am running for him. I must not let him die. Hurry, Melos! Do not delay. Now is the time to show the power of love and loyalty." Melos' clothes were almost completely torn. He was nearly naked. He could barely breathe, and blood trickled from his mouth twice, then 3 times. Still, Melos' eyes were fixed ahead. "I can see it. That's the Tower of Syracuse." Bathed in the setting sun, the tip of the tower glistened. At that moment, a moaning voice carried on the wind. "Mr. Melos." While running, Melos asked, "Who are you?" The voice replied, "I am Philostrates. I am a disciple of Serenuntius." The young stonemason was also running after Melos. He shouted, "It's no use. It's useless. Stop running. We can't save him anymore." Melos shouted fiercely. "No. The sun hasn't set yet." Philostrates said sadly, "Right now, Serenuntius is being executed. You're too late. If you had been just a little sooner, you could have made it." Melos stared at the sun and repeated, "No. The sun hasn't set yet." Melos's heart was about to burst. "I have to keep running." Philostrates chased after him and said, "Stop. Don't you value your life? He believed in you." Even when he was late to the execution site, he remained calm. "No matter what the king said," he replied, "Melos will come." Melos shouted, "That's why I'm running. I'm running because I'm believed in. It doesn't matter if I make it in time. Human lives don't matter. I'm running for something greater. Follow me, Philostrates." Philostrates shouted, as if giving up. "Have you lost your mind? But run if you must. Perhaps you might still make it." Melos was not thinking. He simply ran on, guided by instinct. The sun was sinking below the horizon. The last red light was staining the sky. At that moment, Melos burst into the execution ground like a storm. Melos finally burst into the execution ground. The setting sun cast its last rays, about to sink below the horizon. Melos tried to shout, "Wait! Don't kill him! I've come back here as promised." But his throat was constricted, and only a hoarse whisper escaped his lips. The crowd did not notice Melos' arrival. The execution pillar had already been erected. Serenantius, bound with ropes, was slowly being hoisted upward. Melos, seeing this scene, mustered his last strength. Like swimming through a muddy current, he pushed through the crowd and moved forward. Melos shouted, "It's me, executioner, it is I who should be killed. I, Melos, have returned here. Serenantius was only here as my substitute." Melos rushed up to the execution platform and clung to Serenantius' legs as he was being hoisted up. The crowd murmured, "Brave! Spare him!" The people shouted in unison. Soon, the ropes binding Serenantius were cut. Melos, tears welling in his eyes, said, "Serenantius, strike me. Hit me as hard as you can on my cheek. I had a bad dream in the middle of the night. I didn't doubt you, but there was a moment when I felt a weakness within myself. If you don't strike me, I don't deserve to embrace you." Selenuntus nodded as if he understood everything and struck Melos's right cheek with all his strength. The sound echoed throughout the execution ground. Then, with a gentle smile, he said, "Melos, now strike my cheek. With the same strength as you." In truth, over the past 3 days, there was a single moment when I doubted you. For the first time in my life, I couldn't fully trust you. Therefore, I too must be punished. If you don't strike me, I cannot embrace you. Melos clenched his fist and struck Serenantius' cheek. "Thank you, my friend." The two said this simultaneously and embraced each other tightly. They wept tears of joy aloud. Sobs could be heard from the crowd. Behind the execution site, the tyrant Dionysus watched the two silently. Soon, King Dionysus slowly approached the two, his face flushed, and said, "Your wish has been granted. You have defeated my heart. You have taught me that the heart that believes is not mere fantasy or delusion. Please, will you not accept me as your comrade? Please, hear my wish. I too wish to be one of your comrades." At those words, a loud cheer erupted from the crowd. "Long live the king! Long live the king!" A young girl handed a red cloak to Melos. Melos was unsure what to do and hesitated. Then Serenantius whispered to him, "Melos, you're as good as naked. Put on that cloak quickly. This lovely girl is too embarrassed to let everyone see you naked." At those words, Melos turned bright red. Invited by an acquaintance who was a hunter, I went out boar hunting. The boar hunters all gathered at the home of Grandpa Dazo at the foot of Mount Perino. Despite being 72 years old, he was a lively old hunter with no end in his back. And like all hunters, he was a skilled storyteller. He held his veiny, calloused hands over the fire in the hearth and told us amusing hunting stories. Among them was a story from 35 or 36 years ago, when geese used to come in large flocks to the marshy area at the foot of Mount Carino. I based this story on that tale. Now, imagine the rustling of a large log crackling in the fire, the shadows of a pot and a hook dancing on the sliding door, and the fresh scent of wood filling the air in the mountain cottage. Listen to this story with that scene in mind. This year too, Zansetsu led a flock of wild geese to the marsh. Zansetsu is the name given to one of the geese. This goose had a single white feather mixed in its left and right wings. For this reason, the hunters called this goose Zansetsu. Zansetsu seemed to be the leader of the geese gathering at the marsh. It was a very wise goose, always keeping a watchful eye on its companions even while they were searching for food. Zansetsu never allowed any of them to come within range of a hunter's rifle. Grandpa Dazo had made this marsh his hunting ground. However, once Zansetsu began to appear, not a single goose could be caught. As a result, the old man came to hate Zansetsu deeply. When he learned that Zansetsu had returned this year, Grandpa made up his mind. This year, I will catch Zansetsu. He decided to try a special method he had been planning for some time. The method involved driving numerous stakes into the ground at the spot where the geese usually fed. He tied fishing hooks with snails attached to them to the stakes using twine. Grandpa spent the entire night setting up the hooks. This time, it will work, he thought. The next day, around noon, Grandpa went to the marsh with an excited heart. He saw something moving near the spot where he had set the traps the previous day. Yes, it's caught, Grandpa muttered, rushing over excitedly. This is wonderful, he exclaimed, unable to contain his joy. Though there was only one, he was overjoyed to have caught a live goose. Feathers scattered everywhere, fluttering in the air. The goose flock must have sensed danger and changed their feeding ground, as there was not a single goose nearby. However, Grandpa Dazo thought to himself, it's just a bird. It will probably come back tomorrow. He set out even more fishing hooks than the day before. The next day, at the same time, Grandpa went to the marsh. The autumn sun was shining beautifully. As soon as Grandpa appeared, a large flock of geese took flight with a loud flapping of wings. Grandpa tilted his head in confusion. Looking closely at the spot where the geese had been yesterday, there were indeed traces of them eating. However, today not a single hook had caught anything. What's going on? Grandpa Dazo examined the hooks carefully. All the fishing lines were taut. It seemed that the geese had learned from yesterday's experience and, instead of swallowing the bait immediately, they first grabbed it with their beaks, pulled it out to ensure it was safe, and then swallowed it. It must have been Zansetsu who taught the others. Grandpa Dazo couldn't help but admire them. People say that geese and ducks aren't very smart among birds. But he never imagined that such wisdom could exist in such a small head. Grandpa felt this once again. The next year, Zansetsu laid the flock of geese back again. This year too, they chose a spot with a good view as their feeding ground. Grandpa Dazo had been preparing since summer. He had gathered 5 sacks of snails and prepared them. He scattered them generously in the spot where the geese liked to gather. I wonder how it will go, he thought. That night, when he went to check, sure enough, the flock of geese had gathered and there were traces of them eating. The next day, he scattered snails in the same spot again. The next day, and the day after that, he continued the same routine. The geese, finding a feast for several days in a row, grew very fond of the spot. Grandpa was pleased that everything was going according to plan and smiled contentedly. That night, he built a small hut a short distance from the feeding spot. He hid inside and waited for dawn. The morning light streamed into the hut, creating a pleasant atmosphere. In the distant sky, a flock of geese began to appear as black dots. Grandpa thought the one at the front must be Zansetsu. The flock grew closer and closer. Just a little more patience. When that flock gets closer, I'll take one shot. The old man gripped his hunting rifle tightly. Zansetsu laid the flock while cautiously looking down at the ground. Suddenly, he noticed a small hut in the usual spot that hadn't been there the day before. It's better not to approach places where things have changed. Zansetsu seemed to think instinctively. Leading the flock, he suddenly changed direction and landed at the western edge of the wide marsh. He was just about to enter range, but once again, he was outwitted by Zansetsu. The old man stared into the distance and muttered, "Ugh." Another season passed, and it was once again the time when the geese came to the marsh. The old man took a bowl filled with lowish and went to the birdhouse. As he entered the hut, a single goose flapped its wings and flew toward him. It was the goose he had caught with a fishing hook 2 years ago. It had grown quite tame. Even when he let it out occasionally to exercise, it would return immediately when he whistled and perch on his shoulder. Watching the goose eat, Grandpa said, "Maybe I'll try using this goose this year." From years of experience, Grandpa knew that geese follow the first one to take flight. That's why, ever since he caught this goose, he had planned to use it as a decoy. When he heard that the flock of geese was coming, Grandpa went out to the marsh. The geese had chosen a feeding ground much farther away than last year's spot. It seemed like a large pond had formed there due to the summer floods, and there was plenty of food. This should work. Grandpa looked up at the clear sky and smiled. That night, he released the decoy goose at the feeding ground and waited inside the hut. The battle is about to begin. In the morning, the eastern sky turned red. Zansetsu laid the flock and flew straight toward the sky. The flock landed at the feeding ground and began to cry loudly. Grandpa's heart pounded. He closed his eyes for a moment to calm himself. He gripped his hunting rifle tightly and opened his eyes. Today, I'll finally get my revenge on that Zansetsu. Grandpa moistened his lips and tried to whistle. At that moment, a tremendous flapping sound filled the air. The flock of geese took off all at once. What's happening? The old man rushed out of the hut. Looking up, he saw something falling straight down from the white clouds. A falcon. The flock of geese, guided by the remaining snow, moved very quickly and flew high into the sky. One goose had fallen behind. It was the old man's decoy goose. Having been kept by humans for a long time, its wild instincts had grown dull. The falcon targeted that one goose. The old man blew his whistle desperately. The geese heard the sound and flew toward him. However, the falcon blocked their path and struck with a single blow. White feathers scattered across the morning sky. The goose's body tilted. Just as the falcon was about to attack again, a large shadow crossed the sky. It was Zansetsu. Grandpa raised his hunting rifle to his shoulder, aiming at Zansetsu. But for some reason, he lowered the rifle again. At that moment, Zansetsu saw neither the human nor the falcon. All he saw was the figure of his comrade in need. Zansetsu charged at the falcon with all his strength, striking it with his powerful wings. The falcon was caught off guard and swayed in the air. However, it quickly regained its balance and attacked Zansetsu's chest. White feathers scattered like petals in the clear sky. The two birds tangled together and fell into the marsh. The old man rushed over. The two birds were still fighting fiercely on the ground. However, the falcon saw the human figure and stopped fighting. The falcon flew away, staggering. Zansetsu lay motionless, its chest stained red. Yet, sensing a new enemy approaching, it raised its head with its remaining strength. It glared at the old man. Its face was so dignified it didn't look like a goose at all. It seemed as though it were trying to uphold the dignity of a leader. Even when the old man reached out his hand, Zansetsu no longer struggled. Grandpa was deeply moved. He no longer felt he was facing just a bird. That winter, Zansetsu spent his days in the old man's hut. By spring, his chest wound had completely healed, and his strength had returned. One sunny spring morning, the old man opened the door of the cage wide. Zansetsu tilted his long neck and seemed slightly startled by the suddenly expanded world. But soon, bash! With a pleasant flapping of wings, it soared straight into the sky. The fully bloomed plum blossoms touched its wings and scattered like snow. "Hey, you heroic goose!" Grandpa Tazo called out in a loud voice. "I have no intention of defeating a noble goose like you by cowardly means. Now, do you understand? This winter, bring your companions back to this marshland. And let's fight again, face to face." Grandpa Tazo stood beneath the flowers and spoke those words. Then, with a clear expression, he watched Zansetsu drift northward, disappearing from sight. He continued to watch that scene, for a long time, a very long time. There was no child more timid than Mameta. He was already 5 years old, so he should have been able to go to the bathroom alone at night. However, the bathroom in Mameta's house was outside. Outside stood a large, Mochi-Mochi tree. At night, the tree would sway its hair-like branches across the sky, raising both hands as if to say, "What?" So, he couldn't go to the bathroom alone at night. He always asked his grandfather to come with him. His grandfather was sound asleep, but when Mameta called out softly, "Grandfather," he would wake up immediately. "Do you need to pee?" he would always ask. It's better than wetting the futon we're sleeping on together, he probably thought, and also because he felt sorry for Mameta, who was living alone in the mountain hut with just the two of them. But Mameta's father was a brave man who had died after being struck on the head by a bear during a fight. Grandpa, even at 64, could still chase wild boars and leap from one terrifying rock to another. So why was Mameta so timid? The name Mochi Tree was given by Mameta. It was a very large tree standing right in front of the cabin. In autumn, the tree dropped many brown, shiny fruits. Grandfather would pound the fruits in a wooden mortar, grind them in a stone mill, and make flour. When that flour was steamed into maki, it was so delicious that it made your cheeks fall off. During the day, Mameta would stand under the tree and shout, "Hey tree! Mochi tree! Drop your fruits!" while stomping his feet and acting tough. But at night, Mameta was no good. The tree seemed angry, and it looked like it was threatening him with both hands, saying, "I'm ghost." When he saw the Mochi tree at night, he couldn't even pee. Grandpa knelt down and held Mameta between his knees. "Ah, what a nice night. You can almost touch the stars. In the mountains, even deer and bears are sleeping. Don't be afraid and come here." If Grandpa hadn't said that, Mameta couldn't go out of the room to pee. If he went to bed without going to the bathroom, the next morning the futon would be soaked, so Grandpa always told him. Mameta was 5 years old, and it was embarrassing, but he had to do it. Grandpa said that tonight was the night when the light would shine on the Mochi tree. Grandpa said on the late night of February 20th, the light will shine on the Mochi tree. Wake up and take a look, it's truly beautiful. I saw it when I was a child. Your late father also saw it. It's a festival of the mountain gods. Only one brave child can see it. Mameta said in a small voice, almost crying, "Then I can't do it." Even though his grandfather and father had seen it, he wanted to see it too, but the thought of going alone in the middle of the night to see the Mochi tree made him so scared that his body trembled. He heard that the light would illuminate the tips of the branches, and the tree would glow faintly, looking like a dream. Mameta thought, "I wish I could see it during the day," but thinking about the night made him feel like he might wet himself. Mameta gave up from the start, burrowed into the futon, pressed his face against his grandfather's chest, which smelled of tobacco, and fell asleep. Mameta suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. He heard a sound like a bear growling above his head. "Grandfather!" Mameta tried to hug his grandfather, but he wasn't there. "Don't worry, Mameta. Grandpa just has a little stomachache." It was Grandpa curled up and groaning by the pillow. "Grandpa?" Terrified and startled, Mameta jumped onto Grandpa. But Grandpa rolled onto the tatami mat, clenching his teeth and groaning even more painfully. "I have to call the doctor." Mameta, curled up like a puppy, pushed open the front door with his body and ran out. Still in his knickertuffs and barefoot, he ran all the way to the village at the foot of the mountain. The village was 2 miles away. The sky was filled with stars, and the moon shone brightly. The slope was covered in frost, white as snow. The frost bit into his feet, drawing blood. Mameta ran, crying. It was painful, cold, and scary. But he was even more afraid that his beloved grandfather might die, so he ran to the village doctor's house while crying. The old doctor listened to the story and immediately got up, saying, "Oh." He picked up Mamieta, took his medicine box, and climbed the moonless slope together with him. Along the way, it started snowing even though the moon was out. It was the first snow of the winter. Mamieta saw this from his position on the doctor's back. He kicked the doctor's waist because he was so worried that his grandfather might die. When they entered the hut, Mamieta saw something else strange. "There's a light on the Mochi-Mochi tree." But the doctor said, "Huh? Really? It does look like a light. That's the moon shining behind the Mochi-Mochi tree, and the stars are shining between the branches. And since it's snowing, it looks like a light is on." After saying that, the doctor went into the hut. But after that, Mamieta don't remember anything else. Because Mamieta was busy helping the doctor, adding firewood and boiling water. The next morning, Grandpa's stomachache had gone away, and he was feeling better. After the doctor left, Grandpa said, "You saw the mountain god's festival. The Mochi-Mochi tree was lit up. You were a brave child who could walk alone at night to the doctor's house. So don't ever think of yourself as a coward. If you have kindness, you will understand what you must. Others will be amazed when they see that. Ha ha ha." Even so, after the old man recovered, Mamieta reportedly woke him up every night afterward, calling out, "Grandpa," when he needed to go to the bathroom. There were two young men. They were dressed as British soldiers. They were carrying shiny rifles. They also had two large dogs with them, as white as polar bears. They were walking along a path deep in the mountains, where the fallen leaves rustled under their feet. As they walked, they talked about this. One man said, "This mountain is terrible. There aren't any birds or animals here. I wish we could just fire our guns at something, anything." The other man said, "If we fired a couple of shots into the side of a deer's belly, it would feel great. The deer would spin around and then collapse with a thud." This was a very remote part of the mountains. Even the hunter who had been guiding the two men had lost his way and disappeared. The mountain was a very desolate and frightening place. So the two dogs, which looked like white bears, became dizzy. They went for a while, but eventually foamed at the mouth and died. One man said, "I lost 240,000 yen because these dogs died." The other man said, "I lost 280,000 yen. The first man's face turned pale. Then, he stared at the other man and said, "I want to go home. I feel the same way. It's cold, and I'm hungry. Let's go home. Then, let's stop here. On the way back, we can buy a mountain bird for 10,000 yen at the inn where we stayed yesterday and take it home. They were selling rabbits too. We'll buy them. And let's go back." But then a problem arose. The two men had no idea where to go to get back. The wind blew strongly, the grass rustled, the leaves crunched, and the trees creaked. One man said, "I'm really hungry. My stomach has been aching since earlier." The other man said, "Me too. I don't want to walk anymore." "Me neither." "Oh, what a bother. I wish there was something to eat. I wish there was something to eat." The two men talked like this as the sesqui grass rustled. Then, when they looked behind them, they saw a large Western-style house. There was a big sign at the entrance. One man said, "Hey, this is perfect. This place looks pretty nice. Let's go in." The other man said, It's weird to find a place like this in the middle of the mountains. But anyway, we can probably eat here." "Of course we can. It's written on the sign. Let's go in. I'm starving." The two men stood in front of the entrance. The entrance was made of white bricks and looked very elegant. There was a glass door with golden letters that read, "Please come in." There's no need to hesitate. The two men were very happy and said, "Wow, the world is really well made. Today was a tough day, but there are still good things like this. This place is a restaurant, but they're giving us a free meal, aren't they?" "It seems so." It says no need to hesitate. The two pushed the glass door and entered. Inside, there was an immediate hallway. On the back of the door, in gold letters, it read, "Especially for our larger and younger customers, we offer a special welcome." The two men were delighted again. "Great! We're being specially welcome. We're both young and a bit on the heavy side after all." The two men, filled with joy, continued down the hallway. As they walked along, they came to a door painted light blue. One man said, "This is strange. Why does this house have so many doors?" The other man replied, "It's the same as ocean houses. Houses in cold places or in the mountains are all like this." The two tried to open the door. Then they saw yellow letters written above it. "This is a restaurant with many orders, so please understand." One man said, "It's quite popular, isn't it? Even in the mountains like this?" The other agreed, "That's true. Even big restaurants in Tokyo don't get this many customers." As they talked, they opened the door. On the other side of the door, it said, "We have many orders, so please be patient." One man frowned. "What does this mean?" Another said, "Probably, since we have many orders, it takes time to prepare, so please be patient." "That's probably it. I just want to go inside and sit down and eat something." However, there was another door right next to it. There was a mirror hanging on the wall, and below it was a brush with a long handle. On the door, in red letters, it said, "Customers, please comb your hair here and remove the mud from your shoes." One man said, "That's only natural. I didn't bother at the entrance because I thought we were in the mountains." Another said, "This place must have strict rules. Probably important people come here often." The two combed their hair in front of the mirror and brushed the mud off their shoes. But when they placed the brushes on the board, what happened? The brushes suddenly faded and disappeared. At that moment, a strong wind blew in, filling the room. The two men were startled and clung to each other, then opened the next door with a loud bang and entered. "We need to eat something warm quickly and regain our strength, otherwise, we'll be in trouble," they thought. On the other side of the door, there were more words written. "Please leave your guns and bullets here." Looking around, they saw a black table nearby. One man said, "I see. It would be strange to eat while holding a gun." The other said, "You're right. There must be important people inside." The two men removed their guns, took out the bullets, and placed them on the table. The two men came back to the black door. Written on the door was, "Please remove your hats, coats, and shoes." One man said, "What should we do? Take them off?" The other said, "There's no choice. Let's take them off. There must be important people inside." The two men took off their hats and coats and hung them on hooks. Then they took off their shoes and walked inside the door, making soft footsteps. On the other side of the door, there was another message, "Please leave your tie pins, cufflinks, glasses, wallet, and any other metal items, especially sharp ones, here." Next to it was a large, black, locked safe. One man said, They probably use electricity for cooking. Sharp metal items might be dangerous." The other man replied, "That might be true. We'll probably pay for everything here when we leave." The two men took off their glasses and buttons, put everything into the safe, and locked it. After walking a short distance, they came to another door. In front of it was a glass jar. The door had a sign that read, "Please apply the cream inside the jar to your face and limbs." The two men looked at each other. One said, "What does it mean to apply cream?" The other replied, "It's probably because it's very cold outside. The cream will keep you warm and prevent your skin from cracking. I guess important people come here." The two applied the cream from the jar to their faces, hands, and feet after taking off their socks. There was still some cream left, so they pretended to apply it to their faces and secretly licked it off. Then they hurriedly opened the next door. On the back of the door, it said, "Did you apply the cream well? Did you apply it to your ears?" There was also a small jar of cream. One said, "That's right. I didn't apply it to my ears. I almost cracked my ears. The people in this house are really kind." The other said, "They're really thoughtful. But I'm hungry. It's weird to stay in the hallway forever." Right in front of them was another door. On the door was written, "Dinner will be ready soon. We won't keep you waiting for more than 15 minutes. You can eat right away. Now please pour this perfume from the jar on your head." In front of the door was a golden perfume bottle. The two poured the perfume on their heads, but the perfume smelled like vinegar. One of them said, "This perfume smells weird." The other said, "They must have made a mistake. The person working downstairs must have caught a cold and mixed up the scents." The two opened the door and went inside. On the back of the door, it was written in large letters, "We're sorry for the many orders. This is the last one. Please apply the salt from this jar generously to your body." The two looked at each other in surprise. They saw a blue earthenware jar. It was filled with white salt. One of them whispered, "This is really strange." The other agreed, "I think so too. The many orders weren't for people to eat, but for us." One of them trembled and stammered, so we're... They couldn't speak anymore and shook their bodies violently. We. The two of them couldn't say anything else and began to cry, trembling violently. One of them pushed the door behind them. "Let's escape." But the door wouldn't budge. Further back, there was another door. It had two large keyholes with silver forks and knives carved into them. Written there were the following words, "Thank you for coming all this way. We prepared everything perfectly. Come on, get inside." Moreover, two blue eyes were staring intently through the keyholes. "Awawa! Awawa!" The two cried out loud. Then, from inside the door, a whispering voice could be heard. "No, they've noticed us. They didn't put any salt on it." "Of course not. The boss wrote something strange at the end, saying I'm sorry for your loss. It doesn't matter anymore. They won't give us even a bone anyway. But if we don't go in, it'll be our fault. Should we call them? Should we?" The voice inside grew louder. "Customers, hurry up and come in. The plates are all clean. The vegetables are properly salted and ready. All we need is for you to get in. Hurry up and come in. All right, come in, come in. If you don't like salad, we'll fry it for you. Come on, hurry up." The two of them looked like crumpled pieces of paper, trembling and crying. At that moment, a loud dog barking, "Woof, woof, guoa," came from behind, and two dogs as white as polar bears burst through the door and jumped inside. The blue eyes disappeared instantly. The dogs growled and ran around the room in circles. Then they barked once more, "Woof," and charged at the next door. The door creaked open, and the dogs plunged into the darkness. From the dark depths, a voice murmured, "Meow qua, goro goro," and rustling sounds followed. The room vanished like smoke. The two stood trembling in the cold, huddled in the grass. Looking around, they saw their coat, shoes, wallet, and tie pin scattered among the branches of a tree and the roots of the grass. A strong wind blew, rustling the grass and leaves, and the trees creaked. The dogs returned, growling. Then, someone shouted loudly from behind them, "Soldiers! Soldiers!" The two suddenly felt energized and shouted back, "Hey! Hey! Here! Come quickly!" Then, a guide hunter wearing a straw hat came through the rustling grass. The two finally felt at ease. They ate the dumplings the hunter gave them, bought a mountain bird for 10,000 yen along the way, and returned to Tokyo. However, their faces, which had become wrinkled and disheveled, did not return to their original state even after taking a bath in Tokyo. This is a story I heard from an old man named Mohi in my village when I was little. Long ago, there was a place called Nakayama near our village, and there was a small castle there. A lord named Nakayama-sama lived there. A little way from Nakayama, in the mountains, there was a fox named Gon. Gon was a lonely little fox who lived in a hole he had dug in a forest thick with ferns. Gon would go out into the village day and night, causing all sorts of trouble. He would dig up potatoes in the fields, set fire to dried sesame pods, and pick chili peppers hanging behind farmers' houses. He did all sorts of mischief. One autumn day, after it had rained for 2 or 3 days straight, Gon emerged from his hole, feeling relieved. The sky was clear, and the sound of a shrike echoed through the air. Gon came to the bank of a small stream in the village. Raindrops still glistened on the pampas grass. The stream was usually dry, but 3 days of rain had caused the water level to rise. Pampas grass and bush clover that normally stood above the water were now being swept away by the muddy water. Gon walked down the muddy path toward the lower part of the stream. Suddenly, he saw someone in the river doing something. Gon hid in the grass so he wouldn't be seen and watched what was going on. Gon thought, "That's Hyuju." Hyuju had rolled up his tattered black kimono and was waist deep in the water, shaking a harakiri net to catch fish. He had a headband on his face, and a haji leaf was stuck to the side of his cheek. After a while, Hyuju pulled the bag-shaped part of the harakiri net out of the water. It was filled with grass roots, leaves, and rotten wood, but there were also white, shiny objects here and there. They were the bellies of fat eels and large sea bream. Hyuju threw them into a fish basket along with the debris and submerged the net in the water again. Hyuju carried the fish basket out of the river, placed it on the riverbank, and ran upstream in search of something. Once Hyuju was gone, Gon jumped out of the grass and ran to the fish basket. He felt like playing a prank. Gon took the fish out of the basket and threw them one after another into the downstream part of the river where the net was set. The fish made a plop sound as they sank into the murky water. Gon tried to grab a thick eel, but it slipped out of his hands. Gon got angry, stuck his head into the fish basket, and bit the eel with his mouth. The eel squeaked and wrapped itself around Gon's neck. At that moment, Hoju shouted from across the river, "Thief!" Gon jumped up in surprise, tried to shake off the eel and flee, but the eel remained wrapped around his neck. Gon fled desperately. When he reached the hazel tree near the hole, he turned around. However, Hyuju was not chasing him. Gon sighed in relief, bit off the eel's head, and finally removed it, placing it on a leaf. 10 days later, Gon passed by the back of a farmer's house named Yasuki. In the shade of Yasuki's fig tree, Yasuki's wife was dyeing her teeth black. Next, he passed by the back of the house of Shinbi, the carpenter, and saw Shinbi's wife combing her hair. Gon thought, "Is there some kind of event in the village?" Gon wondered, "Is it the autumn festival? But I don't hear the sound of drums or flutes, and there are no flags at the shrine." As Gon was thinking about this, he found himself in front of Hyuju's house. Hyuju's house was a small, old house with a red well. There were many people gathered inside the house. Women dressed in their best kimonos were stoking the fire in the hearth. Something was boiling in a large pot. Gon thought, "It's a funeral. Someone in Hyuju's family has died." After noon, Gon went to the village cemetery and hid behind the 6 Jizo statues. The sky was clear, and the roof tiles of the castle glistened in the sunlight. Eigan flowers bloomed like red cloth across the cemetery. After a while, the sound of bells ringing, "Kon, kon," came from the village. It was the signal that the funeral had begun. A procession of people dressed in white approached the cemetery. After they passed by, the Eigan flowers were trampled underfoot. Bon stretched his neck to look. Yuju was wearing white paper robes and carrying a memorial tablet. His usually lively red face looked pale today. Bon thought, it must be Hyuju's mother who died. Bon pulled his head back. That night, Gon lay in the hole and thought. Hyuju's mother must have been lying in bed and wanted to eat eel. That's why Hyuju went to get a net. But I played a trick and took the eel. Hyuju couldn't give the eel to his mother. She died without eating it. She must have died thinking about how much she wanted to eat eel. I shouldn't have done that. Hyuju was washing wheat by the red well. Hyuju had been living in poverty with his mother. After his mother died, Hyuju was left alone. Bon watched from behind the storage shed and thought, he's alone just like me. Bon left the storage shed and started walking down the road. Then he heard someone calling, "Sardines for sale! Fresh sardines!" Bon ran toward the voice. There, Yadiro's wife peeked out from the back door and said, "Give me 2 sardines." The sardine seller placed a basket on the side of the road, grabbed the shiny sardines with both hands, and carried them to Yadiro's house. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Gon pulled 5 or 6 sardines from the basket and ran back to Hyuju's house. He threw the sardines through the back door. Looking back up the hill, he saw Hyuju still washing wheat by the well. Gon thought, this is a good deeds to making up for the eel. The next day, Gon picked up a lot of chestnuts in the mountains and carried them to Hyuju's house. Eking through the back door, he saw Hyuju eating lunch, holding a bowl and looking dazed. There was a scratch on Hyuju's cheek. Gon thought, what happened? Hyuju muttered to himself, who on earth threw sardines into my house? Because of that, I was mistaken for a thief and beaten by the sardine seller. Gon thought, oh no. Hyuju had been beaten by the sardine seller and injured. Gon went around to the storage shed, placed the chestnuts at the entrance, and returned home. The next day and the day after that, Gon picked up chestnuts and took them to Hyuju's house. The day after that, he brought not only chestnuts but also 2 or 3 matsutake mushrooms. One moonlit night, Gon went out for a stroll. He passed by the castle of Nekigama-sama and walked for a while. Then, he saw someone coming from the other side of a narrow path. He heard voices. The sound of crickets chirping, Chinchiro Rin, could be heard. Gon hid beside the path and stayed still. The voices grew closer. The ones talking were Hyuju and Kasuki, 2 peasants. Hyuju said, "Hey, Kasuki, something strange has been happening lately." Kasuki asked, "What is it?" Hyuju continued, "Ever since my mother died, someone I don't know has been leaving chestnuts and matsutake mushrooms every day." Kasuki said, "Really? Who could it be?" Hyuju answered, "I don't know. They leave them there without me noticing." Gon followed the 2 men. Kasuki asked, "Is that true?" Hyuju said, "It's true. If you don't believe me, come see for yourself tomorrow. I'll show you the chestnuts." The 2 continued walking in silence. Kasuki suddenly looked back. Gon was startled and stopped, shrinking back, but Kasuki didn't notice him and kept walking. The 2 entered the house of a farmer named Yoshib. The sound of a wooden fish drum echoed, and the shadow of a large bald monk moved behind the sliding door. Gon thought, they're reciting sutras. Gon crouched down by the well. After a while, 3 more people entered Yoshib's house. The sound of sutras being recited could be heard. Gon stayed crouched by the well until the chanting ended. Eventually, Hyuju and Kasuki came out of the house together. Gon quietly followed them, trying to hear their conversation. Gon walked stealthily, following Hyuju's shadow. When they reached the castle, Kasuki said, "About what we were talking about earlier, that was definitely the work of the gods." Hyuju looked at Kasuki in surprise. "What?" Kasuki said, "I've been thinking about it all along, but that wasn't a human. It was the gods. Gods felt sorry for you being alone, so they blessed you with chestnuts and matsutake mushrooms." Hyuju nodded. "I guess so." Kasuki said, "That's for sure. So you have to thank the gods every day." Gon thought, "That's boring. I'm the one who brought the chestnuts and matsutake mushrooms, yet he's thanking the gods? I don't get anything in return." The next day, Gon picked up some chestnuts and took them to Hyuju's house. Hyuju was tying ropes in the shed. Gon quietly entered the house through the back door. At that moment, Hyuju looked up and saw a fox entering the house. Hyuju thought, "That's Gon the fox who stole the eel the other day. He's come to cause trouble again." He stood up, grabbed the matchlock gun hanging in the barn, loaded it with gunpowder, crept up quietly, and just as Gon was about to step out the door, he fired. Gon collapsed with a thud. Hyuju rushed over. Looking inside the house, he saw the chestnuts neatly piled on the earthen floor. Hyuju was surprised. "Oh, no." He looked down at Gon. "Gon, was it you? You were the one who always gave me chestnuts." Gon lay motionless, his eyes closed, but nodded. Hyuju dropped the matchlock gun with a thud. A thin blue smoke still rose from the muzzle,